This is a Danish English breaking on today's verdict in the case of the October 2nd of 2024 grenade attack on Israel's embassy in Denmark, which has now been ruled terrorism. Welcome to Danish-InfoNews TV with breaking news from Copenhagen, Tuesday, February 3rd. Today, 2 Swedish men have been convicted of terrorism for a grenade attack on the Israeli embassy. This shocking case involving teen perpetrators groomed by a criminal network linked to Iran highlights a new, unpredictable threat facing Denmark and Europe. Stay tuned as we unpack the details and the court's ruling. Proxy violence, Foxtrot, and changing terror threat in Denmark. In October of 2024, Denmark experienced what the Copenhagen City Court later ruled to be the first genuine terrorist attack on Danish soil since 2015. 2 young Swedish men, aged 16 and 19 at the time, carried out grenade attacks near the Israeli embassy in Hellerup, north of Copenhagen. Although no one was physically injured, the court concluded that the attack constituted terrorism due to its capacity to intimidate the population and create a serious risk to life. The case has since become emblematic of a broader shift in how terrorism manifests in Europe through criminal networks, proxy actors, and very young perpetrators, often without ideological commitment. Terrorism by majority ruling. When the verdict was delivered, the proceeding judge emphasized that the decision was not unanimous. There is dissent, the proceeding judge stated. Among the panel of 3 legal judges and 6 jurors, 2 judges and 4 jurors found the defendants guilty of terrorism, while 1 legal judge and 2 jurors did not believe there was a sufficient legal base for a terrorism conviction. Under Danish law, the majority decision prevailed. The court's reasoning centered on acceptance and execution of the task, not on ideological or personal belief. As the proceeding judge explained, when an offender accepts and carries out, for example, a contract killing of a person unknown to him, it is still murder. And with that starting point, we have assessed the content of the charges brought. Applied to this case, the court found that accepting and carrying out a commissioned grenade attack, regardless of political views or emotional investment, fulfilled the legal criteria for terrorism. The decisive factor was that the act was suited to intimidate the population and involved an abstract risk of serious harm. Terror on commission. The 2 Swedes had been hired by the Swedish criminal network Foxtrot, which Danish and Swedish intelligence services say has links to Iran and has acted as a proxy for foreign interests. The attackers did not know each other beforehand and were recruited separately for the mission. The youngest defendant admitted to throwing 2 grenades. They exploded near a residential building close to the embassy, damaging the property. Even so, both men were convicted of attempted murder of the residents of the house, as well as terrorism. The court acquitted them of charges related to endangering soldiers guarding the embassy at the time. Investigators described the case as terrorism on commission, violence carried out on order, for payment, threats, or pressure, rather than ideological conviction. Stockholm and Copenhagen, a 24-hour arc of violence. Just 9 hours before the Copenhagen attack, the then 16-year-old also fired shots at the Israeli embassy in Stockholm. The attack was likewise commissioned. While waiting outside the embassy with a pistol, he received messages via encrypted apps urging him to escalate the violence, including instructions such as empty the magazine, switch to automatic, go berserk, and play psychopaths. The sender used the alias Rimfrost, a figure authorities have not been able to identify. The pistol malfunctioned, and the teenager fired only 1 or 2 shots. Encrypted communications between the attacker and the organizers later became key evidence in both the Swedish and Danish investigations. Groomed from childhood. Swedish court documents later revealed that the youngest attacker had been drawn into the Foxtrot network at just 11 years old. Initially, he was asked to deliver things in exchange for money. Over time, the tasks escalated into extreme violence. He told police that he had tried repeatedly to leave the network. At first, he stayed for the money. Later, he stayed because of threats. This is for life, he was told. He described being pressured with threats against his family and offered increasingly large sums of money, first 400,000 Swedish krona, then 800,000, and finally 1 million to carry out attacks. He insisted that he had no hatred toward Jews or Israel and no interest in geopolitics. To explain Foxtrot's structure, he compared it to a supermarket chain outsourcing violence. A powerful organization gives the order, another layer arranges it, and a soldier carries it out, so responsibility never reaches the top. That soldier, he said, was himself. Defense arguments: coercion, not ideology. Defense lawyers argue that the acts were serious criminal offenses, but not terrorism. They describe the defendants as young, manipulated, and coerced, lacking understanding of the broader consequences. One defense lawyer emphasized that his client was an Orthodox Christian from Eritrea with no political or religious conflict with Israel. Another argued that message exchanges showed clear grooming, pressure, and threats. The court acknowledged the coercion, but found it legally irrelevant to the terrorism charge. What mattered was that the defendants accepted and carried out the act. The case set a record sentencing level. The then 16-year-old was sentenced to 12 years in prison, and the then 19-year-old accomplice received 14 years in prison. PET, a more fragmented and unpredictable threat. The case closely aligns with Denmark's broader security assessment. In April of 2025, Denmark's Security and Intelligence Service (PET) warned that the terror threat has become more fragmented and unpredictable, driven by global conflicts, particularly the war between Israel and Hamas. PET assesses the terror threat to Denmark as serious, the second highest level, a status it has maintained since 2010. According to PET, the conflict has mobilized militant Islamist actors, left-wing extremists, and non-ideological actors, including criminals. PET specifically warned that individuals without ideological motivation may carry out terror attacks in exchange for money or status or under coercion, acting as proxies for other actors, including states that do not shy away from using violent means to advance their ambitions. PET does not name these states, but Swedish and Danish intelligence services have stated that Iran has used the Foxtrot network in this manner. Other extremist environments. PET also notes broader trends. Left-wing extremism has become more mobilized around the pro-Palestinian cause, raising its threat level from minimal to limited. Right-wing extremism remains at a general threat level, with concern focused on online radicalization and loosely organized digital networks. Young people and minors are increasingly vulnerable to recruitment through online environments, often outside traditional ideological frameworks. A new model of terrorism. Taken together, these cases illustrate a shift in modern terrorism. Attacks may be carried out by very young perpetrators. Motivation may be financial, coercive, or status-based. Criminal networks can function as international proxy actors. Responsibility is deliberately obscured through layers of intermediaries. Ideology is no longer required for an act to legally qualify as terrorism. As the Copenhagen City Court's ruling makes clear, terrorism is defined by the act and its impact, not by belief. For PET and European authorities, this evolution represents a significant challenge, a threat landscape that is harder to predict, harder to attribute, and harder to prevent. That's the latest on the Denmark-Israel Embassy terror case. For continued updates, expert analysis, and in-depth reports on security threats in Europe, subscribe to Danish-InfoNews TV and turn on notifications. Don't miss a moment of the story as it unfolds.